Hi, everyone. Pastor Don Smith here. Welcome to the Talk About It podcast, where we take relevant topics with a biblical point of view and we talk about it. You know you want to, and so do I. Let's talk about it. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for tuning in one more time to our podcast here, where we have enjoyed hearing your feedback on this particular subject of depression and how we take this particular topic and find a biblical perspective, and we just have a great discussion. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. I just know that this message has so much potential to impact everybody, not only your life, but even those who are in your lives. And so thank you so much for being a part of the vision of this particular podcast, to take relevant topics with a biblical perspective and have a conversation. So here we go in this episode again on depression. And today I want to talk a little bit about anger and how it feeds into depression, how it results into it, how we can deal with it. And I'll use a famous Bible character one more time, Jonah. And maybe you know him very well. You know his story about how God calls him to Nineveh and he didn't want to go, and what God tells him to say, and how he didn't want to say it, and how God delivered and saved 120,000 people because they repented, and how Jonah's heart was very, very angry over the whole issue. I want to dive into that right now and talk about it a little bit. Listen, unless you have ever tied your faith to a certain area, and I think we do this unconsciously, you can't understand what a jolt God's words were to Jonah. I mean, like Jeremiah, Jonah was going about his day-to-day life. He was, doing everything he was supposed to do, and he felt good about his serving God, about his relationship with God, about the people of God. He felt good about all those things, and then God came and interrupted it. Now, he was a prophet, so he was committed to the king. He spoke for God to the people of the nation of Israel, and then one day, God comes and does something. And that chapter 1, verse 2 says, "Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh, announce my judgment against it, because I've seen how wicked its people are." Not Nineveh. This was a Gentile territory. Israel always thought of themselves as spiritually superior to any other people. It would be beneath Jonah then, with that perspective, to preach to them. Not to mention that Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria. Now, the Assyrian people were a ruthless and wicked empire. They treated their prisoners with great cruelty. As a matter of fact, they would catch prisoners just for particular games that they would play, and use the prisoners in those games with cruelty and very, very demented things. And in Jonah's eyes, they did not deserve God's grace because of who they were. And I just want to pause for a minute and think, can we imagine what was going through Jonah's mind? I mean, God, you got to be kidding me. None of the other prophets have to do that. The Ninevites don't deserve it. We're your people, not them. And so, I mean, with all of that in his mind, Jonah's saying, I'm not going. I'm not doing this. He set out in the opposite direction from Nineveh. Like, he didn't only say, I'm not doing it. He went the opposite direction to prove he had no intentions of doing that. He had to get away from God. And verse 3 said, "But Jonah got up and went the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish." Like, he's like, I got to get out of here. I'm not doing this. He went to Joppa. He sails towards Tarshish, but he soon would learn, you can run, but you can't hide from God. You see, God is the God of land and sea. Verse 4, but the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their God for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the load. But all this time Jonah was found asleep down in the hold. So the captain went down after him. How can you sleep at a time like this? He shouted. Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives. I mean, what a storm. So bad that even experienced sailors were afraid. So afraid that they all began to pray to their own gods. And not only did that, but they began to throw over the cargo they were hired to deliver, throw it overboard just to try and save the ship. And what does Jonah do? He goes down below, and I think he does something incredibly odd. Unless you experience depression, you understand. Let's talk about it. I mean, you would think the man of God would pray. No, he went to sleep. How could you sleep at a time like this? I mean, didn't he care about others? Didn't he care about himself? I mean, wasn't he scared too? The captain even thought this was crazy. So the Gentile captain had to wake up the man of God and tell the man of God to pray. And even if he wasn't willing to help keep the ship floating, at least he could pray. And you got to notice Jonah's response here. He was like a stubborn child. Crossed his arms, locked his arms, refused to move. You can't make me admit I was wrong. You can't make me say I'm sorry. I'm not moving, and I'm not about to cooperate with you. Now, at this point, you have to assume there is depression in Jonah's life. Why? Because watch the symptoms of depression. He withdrew. He ignored priorities. He slept, and he's not responding. During one of the most dangerous times in his life. Why would a person be depressed over a specific request from God? It's a great question. Well, I'll tell you what I believe the answer is, because it interrupted his life. Chapter 1, verse 7, then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods that caused the terrible storm. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. Why has this awful storm come down on us? They demanded. Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What's your nationality? And Jonah answered, I'm Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. And the sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. Oh, why did you do it? They groaned. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do to you to stop this storm? Throw me into the sea, Jonah said, and it will become calm again, and I know that this terrible storm is all my fault. Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get the ship to land, but the stormy sea was too violent for them, and they couldn't make it. They cried out to the Lord, Jonah's God. "O Lord," they pleaded, "don't make us die for this man's sin. Don't hold us responsible for his death. O Lord, you've sent this storm upon him for your own good reasons." Then the sailors picked up Jonah, threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. You have to understand, Jonah had a life that suited him. Listen, he's serving God. He was doing a work that he could take pride in. He was a prophet. Then God stepped in and not only asked him to step out of his comfort zone, but asked him to do something that actually repulsed him. It humiliated him. He responded by running away. He thought that if he could get out of the land that he associated with God's presence, that the land that he associated with God's voice, that God would stop calling him to Nineveh. I mean, it was a quick emotional response, which is a sign of anger. Let me say that again. Quick emotional responses are usually a sign of anger. And Jonah would soon realize he'd cut himself off from a role that was so much bigger than him. And besides that, Now he's in Gentile territory anyway. He hadn't solved a thing by running away. And let's just pause there for a minute. Problems are never solved by running away. If you're experiencing depression, you know that the temptation to just run away from all your problems is very, very big. But let's just admit right here, right now, that problems are never solved by running away. Jonah, earlier he'd wondered what God was thinking. Now he's wondering, what's he thinking? You see, angry with God, down on himself, not wanting to deal with any of it, all he does is he goes below. He goes down below. You see, depression usually affects your sleep patterns. Either you sleep too much or you sleep not enough. If you have experienced depression, you probably have experienced both of those. You see, sleeping too much is a way of escapism, a way to avoid the pain of truth. When you're asleep, you don't have to comply. You don't have to respond. You don't have to react. You don't have to make any choices. So while Jonah's asleep, the sailors take action. They cast lots. Then they confront Jonah. And wisely this time he answers. When they find out who he worshiped, they begin to panic because they know who Jonah's God is. And so what they do is they try to spare Jonah's life, but they realized they couldn't. And then they prayed and asked Jonah's God to forgive them for having to throw Jonah overboard. It's an incredible story, if you really read it this way. And when they did that, this external storm stopped, but not Jonah's internal storm. Death seemed unavoidable at this point to Jonah. So he calls out to God, and God answers. Chapter 2, verse 1. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from inside the fish, he said, and I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me. You threw me into the ocean of depths. I sank down to the heart of the sea. The mighty waters engulfed me, and I was buried beneath your wild and stormy waves. Then I said, O Lord, you have driven me from your presence, yet I will look once more toward your holy temple. I sank beneath the waves, and the waters closed over me. Seaweed wrapped itself around my head. I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates locked shut forever. But you, O Lord my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. You know, there's something about meeting death face to face that has a way to change your attitude. Hello, somebody. See, he thought he was going to drown, but God saved him. And inside the belly of a fish, he finds himself thankful. What? And because of God's deliverance, what he does is he promises faithfulness. Watch this, verse 7 of chapter 2. As my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods turn their back on all the God's mercies. But I will offer sacrifice to you with songs of praise. I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. He promises faithfulness inside the belly of a fish. You would think that after such an event in his life, Jonah would no longer struggle with depression. He would no longer struggle with God's leadership. But you and I both know that's not how the story goes. God again tells him, go to Nineveh. But he went, and his heart wasn't in it. I bet he kicked every loose stone on his way there. Like he felt no compassion for those people. He did what God wanted. That's in chapter 3, verse 4. On the day Jonah entered the city, he shouted to the crowds, 40 days from now, Nineveh will be destroyed. He did what God wanted. Nineveh was so large, guys, that it took him 3 days to walk across it. Like, he was expecting to preach at least that long, but on the first day, they all repented. Watch this. God saw it and changed his mind about destroying Nineveh. Chapter 3, verse 10, when God saw that they had done and how they had put a stop to their evil ways, he changed his mind and did not carry out the destruction that he had threatened. How embarrassing to Jonah. He was a prophet. What he said was supposed to come true. Now his joy is turning to complaint. And let's look at Jonah's complaint here. Chapter 4, verse 1. This change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. So he complained to the Lord about it. Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this? This is why I ran away to Tarshish. I know that you're a merciful and compassionate God, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. You're eager to turn your back from destroying people. Just kill me now, Lord. Hello, somebody. I'd rather be dead than alive if what I predicted will not happen. Listen, most speakers would be excited to have people heed their message. I mean, Jeremiah would have been delighted. But Jonah was disappointed. Seeing the Ninevites repent, it enraged Jonah. He wanted God to confine his love to Israel only. Even though God had been merciful to him, he didn't want God to be merciful to Nineveh. If he had any doubts about being depressed, listen, let me put it this way. Maybe Jonah didn't notice his own depression. But if you and I had any doubts about him being depressed, we don't anymore. Think about it. Now he's suicidal again. Angry and irrational, he asked God to take his life. His joy is absolutely gone. In all the other stories we've looked at so far, I've found it easy to be sympathetic, but not here. I mean, I can understand how accumulated stress, loss, and exhaustion can get to you. I've been there. You've probably been there too. But it's hard to identify with Jonah, who pouts because God is loving, merciful, patient, and kind. I mean, how can you feel sorry for someone like that? Don't you just want to say to Jonah, hey man, get a grip? If we had been able to tell him, Jonah, get a grip, it wouldn't have made a difference. Why? Because telling a depressed person to get over it just reinforces their grievances. Condemning a person's depression does not make it go away. I got some questions. When you're depressed over things that others think is petty, it's hard to get beyond your depressed feelings because you're reluctant to share what's really bothering you. I mean, it seems right to you to be bothered, but you hesitate to talk about it. You're not interested in someone else's rational explanation of why you shouldn't feel the way you do. You want to hold on to your pain without logic being applied to it. But not talking about what's bothering you stands in the way of your recovery. Let me say it. Not talking about what's bothering you stands in the way of your recovery. What you do in that moment is you rob yourself of getting it out in the open where it has no power. See, your unexpressed emotions hinder your ability to communicate with God. God asked Jonah a question. Chapter 4, verse 4, the Lord replied, "Is it right for you to be angry about this?" And Jonah, like we all would, resisted answering. Like, if he did, he would have to relinquish the way of his thinking. Like, if he admits to God, I don't have a right to be angry, he'd have to admit that I've got a wrong way of thinking. So he wanted to just continue to mull it over. So he withdrew away from the city. Watch this. God had called him to pronounce judgment on the city, but God had also called him to witness its repentance and then to rejoice in its salvation. But Jonah doesn't do that. He pronounces judgment, but he did not want to witness its repentance and rejoice in its salvation. Instead, He chose to sit alone, singing the blues in the heat. And God is merciful. Verse 6, and the Lord God arranged a leafy plant to grow there, and soon it spread a broad leaf over Jonah's head, shading him from the sun. This eased his discomfort, and Jonah was very grateful for the plant. You see, he felt the vine was a blessing from God, that it was a confirmation things would turn out the way he wanted it to. But the next day, you know the story, God actually caused a worm to eat the vine, and there went his shade. And not only that, a hot wind came. And he was so miserable that he thought it would be better off to be dead. And here we go, verse 8. And as the sun grew hot, God arranged for a scorching east wind to blow on Jonah. The sun beat down on his head until he grew faint and wished to die. Death is certainly better than living like this, he said. Wow. Come on. The destruction of the vine gave Jonah a taste of what destruction was like. He was more upset over the death of a plant than he would have been over the death of 120,000 people. You see, God has a way of revealing the true nature of our hearts, doesn't he? Let me say that again. God has a way of revealing the true nature of our hearts. It's crazy. Crazy when you stop to think about it. The destruction of the vine gave Jonah a taste of what destruction really looks like. So God asked him, and I believe God's asking us the same thing today. What right do you have to be angry? You see, he was angry over the death of a plant and wanted to die. He was in a place where his anger was way out of proportion. But at least he admitted to being angry, and his honesty gave God room that he needed, room for truth talk, which is really what we need when we're going through depression. We really need to face the truth. Verse 10, then the Lord said, you feel sorry about the plant, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and it died quickly. Wow. Jonah did nothing to deserve the plant or the shade it provided. It was given to him without effort on his own part. It was fragile and its usefulness was limited, yet Jonah put great value on a fragile thing. Verse 11, but Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? God says, do you think I shouldn't spare Nineveh? Like you're putting a plant on the same level as 120,000 people. Can you really compare the two? Surely people have a greater value than plants do, don't they? How did Jonah respond to God's final questions? Did he remain angry and unrepentant? Did he hold on to his depression? Did he go back to Israel feeling disgraced? Or did he learn to appreciate the breadth of God's grace? The truth is, no one knows. The book leaves us hanging. Why? Well, this is Pastor Don's commentary. I hope it blesses you. I believe it's so we could ask ourselves some questions. And here are some of those questions. Am I like Jonah? When you die and go to heaven, is there going to be anyone there that you would be grieved to see? I mean, don't laugh too hard at Jonah. He's not alone, is he? Are we upset by the grace God shows others? Can I acknowledge anger? Listen, if you have a consistent, serious problem with depression, you probably have not resolved some area of anger in your life. Just like night follows day, depression follows unresolved, repressed, and improperly expressed anger. One of the best definitions of depression is frozen anger. Jonah was angry from the time God called him, but he kept pushing it down. No wonder when he finally admitted it, he just wanted to die. And what happens to Jonah? It may not seem like an important question, but I believe your answer reveals something about you. Are you optimistic and hopeful about Jonah? Do you believe that God cares about us when we are disobedient? Do you really believe that God is compassionate? Are you a pessimist? Do you believe we can get to a point where we are beyond redemption? You see, I believe God's final words to Jonah softened Jonah's heart. I believe they melted his anger and sent him back to Israel, a changed man. Now, this is what I believe. I believe this because of what God has done in my own heart. I know what it's like to run from God, and you probably do too. And like Jonah, my theology was faulty. God not only loves certain people, and you can't be happy doing what God calls you to do in different places. Let me say this again. God doesn't only just love certain people. And there's no way you can be happy doing what God has called you to do in one particular place somewhere else. I personally am so glad that Jonah and I were both proven wrong. What a great story. Listen, if that's impacted you in any way, I hope it's helpful. I hope it causes you to stop for a moment and ask yourself, do I have any frozen anger that I need to deal with? If the answer is yes, my encouragement to you is deal with it and watch depression in your life be removed. God bless you. I'll see you next time.